What is up, guys? Welcome back to another daily build video, and this one's a little bit of a special episode. We usually do these Summit Bundle dailies on Tuesday, which is today. We're going to release this a little bit later in the day because we didn't know which Summit cars were actually going to be required this week, because we have a new month. It's not just a new week, it's a new month, which means it's a new theme. And this week's theme, or this month's theme, is the Forsberg racing theme. And it's going to be a lot more than just racing. I think we're going to get a lot of drifting type stuff, because the Summit Bundle this week actually features two drift cars. One is this R34 drift car, and then the other one is the 370Z Forsberg drift car as well. So those are the two cars we're going to need to talk about in today's video. Let's go. All right, now before we get into the cars themselves, we have to talk about the settings. So if you've been playing the game since launch, you know that they included some new settings as of season 3. Those are for steering. So if we go down to controls, we go into steering, we've got a few new settings here. We've got direct mode, sensitivity, dynamic max lock, those three. Now, I did not do any testing on direct mode. It's not a mode that I actually like driving. It's way too touchy for me. There's zero steering filters, and it makes it really difficult. So for highly skilled players, this might be the best option. And in fact, in drifting in general, I've heard a lot of players say that direct mode on is actually really good for drifting, but it's just not something I prefer. Now in this video, I have to clarify something, because you might be wondering, why not just use direct mode for drifting? Well, for the summits, drifting and drift racing are sort of side by side. Usually we get a couple of events that are just drifting, so meaning you have to score points, and then we usually get a couple of events that are actually races, but you have to use drift cars for them. So I've planned for both. I've got two pro settings sets for you for each of these two cars, so basically 4 different builds in this video. All of those builds are going to feature direct mode off. If you prefer to turn direct mode on and give it a try, be my guest. But for me personally, I actually prefer using the sensitivity and dynamic max lock settings. Now for racing in general, I've got dynamic max lock set at 70. For regular racing, that's what I've got. So like for hypercars, street tier 2, that type of stuff, 70, and 80 for the sensitivity. However, if you're using a drift car and you're supposed to be racing with that, you're not actually gaining points, I dropped this max lock down to 50. You're welcome to play with this, but for me, 50 makes the car much more controllable. There's something that happens when you're in a drift and you actually need to straighten the car up, so you steer to the opposite side. The car likes to flick all the way to the opposite side and enter another drift. It makes it really uncontrollable when you're trying to exit a drift. Sometimes you just want to drift a corner and end straight, and to do that, it takes precision on your stick. And so if you drop the dynamic max lock to 50, it actually creates a much more stable scenario for you. Like I said, you're welcome to play with this, but here is my suggestion. So for racing, drop it down to 50, keep the sensitivity at 80, and make sure your dead zone is at 0. Then when you want to go to drifting, you need that really twitchy, really fast switchback type feel. You gotta go back up to 70 on your max lock. I'm gonna detail that in each build, I'll let you know, but basically for drifting, dynamic max lock at 70, steering at 80, 0 at dead zone, same settings, but drop this down to 50 for racing. That's it. It's kind of annoying because we're gonna kind of have to switch back and forth. I think when we do the stream, I'm gonna do all the drift events and then do all the race events. I'm assuming there's gonna be both, so just trying to be prepared here. Anyways, let's get into the cars. All right, starting with the R34 and its race build. We got 40% on the brake balance. We move down into the suspension. We're at -4 on the spring front, +5 spring rear, -3 compression front, +8 compression rear, -3 rebound front, -3 rebound rear. In the ARBs, we're at +10 on both. And for the camber, we're at -0.25 on both. Now this gives us a lateral G of 1.05, not great. Obviously you want something a little higher. That's less than street tier 1, but they're drift cars. They're meant to be super slidey and not grippy at all. So 1.05 lateral G, 21.9 braking, and 3.4 acceleration. Like I said, this is kind of a weird stats. You can't really compare this to anything because they're drift cars. You're trying to use them for race. Anyways, let's move into the drift build. So the drift build for the R34 looks like this. We've got -3 on the final drive, -15 for the grip rear, 72 for the brake balance. And then if we move down into the load rear, minus 20 for the load rear, 0 for the spring front, 10 for the spring rear, 0 for the compression front, and then 20 for the compression rear, 0 for the rebound front, 20 for the rebound rear, 0 for the ARB front, 10 for the ARB rear, and then minus 0.25 on the camber front, and minus 0.04 for the camber rear. Now I have to mention something as well. These new settings, the dynamic max lock and the sensitivity, if you look at my scores before and after for drift trials, it's night and day. If you increase your dynamic max lock and your sensitivity, you're going to have a much twitchier car, which means you can transition from drifting right to drifting left very, very quickly. Now this is also why people like direct mode for drifting, because you can just flick the car around and not have to worry about it. You're always going to be in a drift. You're going to score pretty high, and that's the same thing with this as well. You basically are able to transition from left to right really, really fast, and you're minimizing the amount of time that your car is in a straight position, aka not getting any points. So on my very first attempt with this car, I haven't touched this car and I haven't touched drifting in months. And with my very first attempt, I went from a 779,000 points as my highest score for this car up to 822,000 on the first attempt using the new settings. So those steering sensitivity settings are really, really important. Make sure you adjust those. Let's move on to the 370Z. And remember, this is actually the Forsberg Racing Nissan 370Z. It's not the regular 370Z. This is the Forsberg one. Anyways, this one, we start out with the brake balance. We're at 55%. This is the race build, by the way. Then we go down into the spring front. We're at minus 10. Spring rear, minus 10. Compression front is going to be minus 6. Compression rear is 10. Rebound front is minus 6. Rebound rear is 10. And then the anti-roll bars, we're at plus 10 in the front, minus 10 in the rear. Camber is going to be 0 in the front and minus 0.25 in the rear. Again, make sure if you're doing a race with this build, you drop your dynamic max lock down to 50. And for drift trials, we're going to be looking at minus 5 for the grip front, minus 10 for the grip rear, 70 for your brake balance, and then 0 for brake power, 0 load front, 0 load rear. Moving to the suspension, we are at 5 on the spring front, 0 in the rear. We're at 3 on the compression front and 0 in the rear. We're at 3 on the rebound front and 0 in the rear. Plus 10 on the ARB front, plus 5 on the ARB rear, and then minus 0.25 on both cambers front and rear. Again, that's for drift trials. Make sure you have your steering set to 80 and your dynamic max lock to 70 on drift trials. Now, again, with these new settings, I was able to increase my score significantly. I got an 805 on Ebisu style, which was my test drift course, and I reduced my race time by about 5 seconds, and I got a 2:33 on Scotto versus Scotto. It's not the best time when you compare it to, like, say, the Unicorn, but it does okay. It's just not as fast as the Unicorn or the Evo X. So if we get a choice to use other cars, or if there's like no restriction on any of the races, you're definitely going to want to use the Unicorn. But outside of that, I don't have anything else for you for the Summit bundle for these two cars specifically. Stream will be in a few hours. Enjoy that. We'll have some more information there, obviously, and then of course I'll try to get that Summit guide out to you as fast as possible. So anyways, enjoy the Summit, enjoy the drifting. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.